Hey guys, Hailey, Lain, aka Key Black here, and welcome back to another episode of Off the Cuff. And today, I'm gonna be finishing up the Millennium enemy arc in the early Yu-Gi-Oh manga. And I've mentioned before, this is basically the last hurrah of each kind of saga being a different game of the week kind of setup, before we go into Duelist Kingdom in the very next volume. So I'm definitely gonna miss this, but the Duelist Kingdom arc and onward is also extremely fun. I'm excited to get to that stuff as well. So, the Millennium enemy arc in the early Yu-Gi-Oh manga. I think we last left off on basically Anzu's soul being sealed into her doll, and onwards is basically, as soon as that happens, pretty much everything's hit the fan. The mask is dropped, and Bakura's no longer pretending to be one of their friends. He just straight up goes, "You should know, by the way, that this is the ultimate in role-playing games. And what I mean by that is, we're playing a shadow game." It's like, this is... He's so funny. I don't think I appreciated that as much when I was younger, is that he's never told them a lie. He's been telling them the truth the entire time, just a very incomplete truth. And it makes for some hilarious interactions where he is completely unfazed by all the reactions, that the Yugi gang is having to, like, you just trapped us in a game. You fiend, how dare you do this to us? We thought you were our friend. And he's just like, lol, lamau. Anyway, Zork flies off to his castle. What are you guys gonna do next? You go ahead and roll initiative. It's like he's having so much fun doing what he's doing in this. It's contagious. He's a very charismatic and charming kind of villain. So he's absolutely skyrocketed to being one of my favorite villains of all times. And I'm just like, I love that I'm getting more out of it every time I reread this series. Like, I came back to these sagas, like, I don't know how many times as a kid, mostly just to, like, get to my favorite moments, like, when Yugi finds out he has another self, and in this saga, it's when he actually gets to meet his other self for the first time. It's really cute, and it plays really nice in contrast to what's going on with Bakura in this saga, because, the other Bakura is acting completely independently of his other self, and Ryo Bakura doesn't seem to be aware of his other self any more than, like, oh, there was this voice coming from the ring. So it's fun to see in this saga, Yugi's working together, Bakuras are not. And so when Ryo Bakura finally makes his re-entrance in this saga, it's in this grand move to save his friends from what the other Bakura has been doing, but it's a very self-sacrificial kind of thing, and it's like, man, I guess that's the worst case scenario for this kind of thing, huh? It's really sad, actually, but it ends on a really sweet note. I think the Death Tea arc and the Shoddy saga are probably the most criminally underserved sagas in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because, from Duelist Kingdom onward, at least has that anime. They got a lot of things, screwed up in the early episodes, in my opinion. But, people often say that, oh, Season 0 adapted the first 7 volumes, and it's like, it kinda did. But all the important stuff gets changed or, completely nixed altogether. Like, the first stage in the Shoddy fight is gone. In Death Tea, the entire horror zone is completely changed, so we don't even have the electric chair ride of death or the chop man. And in this one, there's the addition of Miho, and she doesn't really have a huge impact on what's going on, but it's like, it would have hit so much harder if it had been done faithfully to what's been done in the manga. I would have just loved to see this adapted with the same love and care that Dark Side of Dimensions was animated. But, man, I would have loved for the entire series to be adapted that way. But man, Takahashi's art and pacing in this saga, as always, is just absolutely fantastic. I love that it's kind of like my first introduction to D&D. I'd never played that kind of game before, so this was basically my first exposure to, okay, how does a tabletop role-playing game kind of work? And now, after a couple of years after having played Rise of Balceros, rereading this chapter again, I'm having so much fun going like, oh my god, this really is what it's like to play a good campaign where you're really getting into it with your characters. Like, there's the finale moment with Bakura, right, where he's got Zork kind of going through his, this isn't even my final form, and then there's even the trope of like, oh no, things are at their worst, and oh look, there's his weak point, and oh, here's the return of the guy that we met earlier who's gonna basically give us the big boon that we need to save the day in the end. It's like, man, this is exactly what it feels like. And I'm just in awe of how Takahashi was able to capture that in his manga without sacrificing any sincerity, without making it feel cheesy or ham-fisted, and while also adding that flavor of like horror. Like, again, Yu-Gi-Oh was the first like horror-themed anything that I really had exposure to. And so going back through it now kind of with a different perspective on like, okay, now I've kind of, you know, played a couple of these similar kind of games, and now I've actually seen some of the horror movies that he's actually been referencing throughout the series. I absolutely love the kinds of dynamics and the different kinds of like, here's how the situation could go that he's been playing with throughout the early set of the manga. And I've been going ahead in my reread and then coming back to some of these chapters to talk about them on Off the Cuff, and I've just been loving the fact that the manga never loses that, even when it just kind of gets overtaken by duel monsters. So I am excited to get into Duelist Kingdom next, guys. Thanks so much for listening and for watching. I'm gonna cap it off here and see you in the next Off the Cuff.